Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Craig Jukes and I'm the Director of the Ngunnawal Indigenous Higher Education Centre here at the University of Canberra. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting here today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders both past and present. Chancellor Dr Tom Calma, Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver, our guest speaker tonight, the Ngunnawal Elders Council, and in particular Aunty Agnes Shea, Air Vice Marshal Leo Davies, the Deputy Chief of the Royal Australian Air Force, Air Commodore Bob Rogers, the Director General for Personnel, Air Force, Air Commodore Tracy Smart, Director General for Air Force Health Services, Dr Len Shaka, Fellow of the Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering at the Defence Science and Technology Organisation, University of Canberra staff, students and alumni. Welcome to the University of Canberra's Ngunnawal Lecture Series for 2014, Serving Country, Centenary and Beyond. The Ngunnawal Lecture Series originated as an initiative of the Ngunnawal Centre at the University of Canberra to give voice to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander views on the many topics that shape our communities and Australia as a whole. The Ngunnawal Lectures continue to do this by hosting prominent Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people to deliver lectures on issues of significance. Lectures and events such as these are important ways in which the university can communicate and share knowledge with the wider community, which can impact on the quality of our graduates and the future government policies. I would like to commence proceedings this evening by inviting Ngunnawal Elder Aunty Agnes Shea to provide the welcome to country for this evening's event.
Well, good evening, everyone. How are you all on one of these lovely fresh evenings? Like Craig said, I'm Aunty Agnes Shea and I'm one of the Ngunnawal Elders, and I'm very proud and honoured to be invited here today. Also, I'd like to acknowledge my two nieces, Caroline and Susan, who's joined me this afternoon. And on behalf of those and myself and our other Ngunnawal families, I'm here to welcome you to country. I'd also like to start off by acknowledging Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver, Dr Tom Calma, and all of those other special and distinguished guests that Craig mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, and if anyone who joined us this evening for the first time, a very special welcome to you. And for those who have been here before, welcome back. And I extend that welcome to all elders, regardless of your cultures. The Ngunnawal community are the traditional custodians of Canberra and the region. Oh, before I go on further, I forgot to acknowledge some very special people. All of my friends from the Air Force and the Defence. Thank you. The Ngunnawal Nation is made up of several family groups, and not just individuals, who represent the interests of this country. Therefore, as a community, we have an elected body known as the United Ngunnawal Elders Council to represent us, along with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island elected body of the ACT. This is important for you to understand and acknowledge, for our identity is a collective identity. There are other Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples from many nations around the country and the world who have come to live on Ngunnawal land, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to them also. Now I'll explain the meaning of a welcome. The tradition of welcoming people is a cultural practice, and that was handed down by our old people from the beginning of time. And what it means, before entering another person's country, you would always announce your arrival and not enter until a traditional owner welcomed you. And the reason for this practice is to protect your spirit while you're in another person's country, but also show respect to the people of the country you're entering. And as one of the Ngunnawal elders, I'm always very proud to see when non-Indigenous organisations and government do ask an elder to come and do welcome to country. It shows that they are also respecting our traditional culture. And it helps to build the reconciliation and bring respect between many cultures of people who now live in the ACT and region, but also throughout Australia. And it is wonderful to see that this practice is now recognised and respected. The Ngunnawal people, as with all Aboriginal people, have a great heritage that we would like to share with all Australians from every walks of life. And as you are aware, Canberra means meeting place, and Canberra has been a place of gathering for many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people of Australia to come together to deal with important business, but also for ceremony occasions. Our ancestors believed in the importance of people gathering together for the purpose of building relationships, sharing knowledge, and to celebrate the gift of heritage and history. We believe it's important for all to recognise our unique histories and to gain understanding that our land is our heritage and how the loss of land has disconnected many Aboriginal peoples from their spiritual links, cultural heritage and identity. So on behalf of all the other Ngunnawal families, Caroline and Sue, I'd like to thank you all again for having us here. And now I'll finish like I normally do in the language of the Ngunnawal people, Ngana, Yarrabai, Yangu, which means you're welcome to leave your footprints on our land now, or in other words, welcome to Ngunnawal country. Thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Auntie Agnes. It's always wonderful to hear you welcome us to your country. Next, I'd like to introduce the Chancellor of the University of Canberra, Dr. Tom Calma. Dr. Calma is well respected for his inspirational and inclusive advocacy for human rights and social justice, and has dedicated his life to improving the lives of all Australians, but in particular Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Dr. Calma has been involved in Indigenous affairs at a local level, community, state, territory, national and international for near on 40 years. He's been a senior Australian diplomat in India and Vietnam and was actively involved in the formation of the Close the Gap for Indigenous Health Equality campaign, where I had the privilege of working alongside Tom for a number of years. He's a co-chair of Reconciliation Australia, and that's very apt in this Reconciliation Week to have Tom here with us. Tom's previously served as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner and the Race Discrimination Commissioner for a number of years. He's an elder from the Canarican and Iwaja people from Southeast Darwin region and Coburg Peninsula in the Northern Territory. Tom is the first male Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander Chancellor at any Australian university, and we're proud that he's the Chancellor at the University of Canberra. He also sits on the National Council of Defence Reserve Support Council and has a very keen interest in this area as well. So please welcome Dr. Tom Calma.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you all for coming along tonight. Auntie Agnes, thank you again for your welcome to country, and to other Ngunnawals who are here, and I pay respects to elders past and present, and particularly acknowledge the youth, Ngunnawal youth and all of our youth, because they're going to be our future leaders, the custodians of our stories, our cultures, our histories, and it's an incumbent on all of us as adults to help grow up our youth to make sure that they can take on those extreme challenges that will confront them. And one of those challenges, and I'll put in an apology now for Professor Stephen Parker, who's the Vice Chancellor of the university, because he's over at ANU debating with the Vice Chancellor of ANU the issue of fee deregulation at the university sector. And so that's going to be one of the big challenges that our students of tomorrow will be facing in the years to come. And it's going to be an important one, and I'd urge you to have a look at that clip when it comes out. I believe it's going to be on YouTube tonight or tomorrow, and it should be quite an interesting debate, because a lot of the information out there is I guess questionable and is being continually challenged. Thank you for helping us celebrate at the university National Reconciliation Week. That started last week on the 27th and concludes tomorrow on the 3rd of June. Reconciliation Week starts off each year to celebrate and recognise the 1967 referendum, the most successful referendum in Australia, where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were recognised as citizens in a way, because they were able to be counted on the census as Australians, instead of being considered in the category of flora and fauna as it was in the census. But it also gave the responsibility to the federal government for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs. It concludes tomorrow on the anniversary of the Mabo decision, the High Court decision that overturned the Doctrine of Terra Nullius, which in fact said, the Doctrine of Terra Nullius says that when Australia was colonised there were no peoples here, when in fact we know that there were for some 40, 50,000 years before colonisation. So the High Court decision, which then came out and was articulated through legislation, the Native Title Act, the anniversary is tomorrow. So the whole issue is about let's walk the talk. That's what reconciliation is about. We've seen over 800 events celebrated around the nation over this past week, and they'll go on. And this is one of those such events. And it's an important event because it's an opportunity to really talk about what reconciliation is about. It's about recognising, it's about respecting, it's about understanding, and to be able to share perspectives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander life that people may or may not know and understand. But it's also a bit of a precursor to, and particularly the 1967 referendum, to when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were effectively struck off the Constitution, because as part of the 67 referendum it also took away the powers to discriminate against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And so the challenge is going to be in the next referendum, which is potentially happening around 2016, 2017, when people of Australia will be asked to vote in favour of including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our Constitution. And so that's the Recognise campaign, this little badge, the little R. That's what that stands for, the Recognise campaign. And I really urge all of you here tonight, including all the students, to start to get involved and engaged in that process, because the better informed we are, the better able we are to make decisions. The University of Canberra has a number of local and national partnerships designed to break down barriers to higher education for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The university is working across our region, not only this country, New South Wales region, but across the Asian region. We work with the ACT Education and Training Department to support their Indigenous Aspirations Initiative for students in years 5 to 12. With the Smith family to support Indigenous students through the Smith Families Learning for Life program, and the numerous schools across the region to support Indigenous students. And we have a very, very important and key partnership with the Aurora project and the Stronger Smarter Institute through the work that we do in trying to influence the way teachers are educated and perform their duties across the nation. We're breaking down barriers through the ACT Indigenous Success Project that is being led by the University of Canberra in partnership with the Australian National University. And both universities are working with local secondary schools to break down barriers to higher education for students, for both Indigenous students and also low socioeconomic background students across the ACT and southern New South Wales. The Aspiration Initiative Academic Enrichment Program is a collaboration of the Aurora Project, the University of Canberra and the Charlie Perkins Trust. Aurora also works on TAI with the Roberta Sykes Foundation to increase opportunities and support for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander high school students across the nation, in fact. The University of Canberra is committed to reconciliation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and has developed a Reconciliation Action Plan to identify and pursue opportunities to advance reconciliation as part of the university's core teaching and research activities through meaningful relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Relationships that are founded on respect for culture, knowledge and beliefs. The current Reconciliation Action Plan proposes a highly inclusive program that flows through all universities' operations, moving us towards equality in the representation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples among staff, as well as achieving better outcomes for our students. And it's not just a council plan, but it's a plan that's owned by the whole of the university, everybody within our organisation, and that's what's so great about the University of Canberra. The university has a number of local and national partnerships that are developed to breaking down barriers to higher education for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We're working, as I mentioned, with the Stronger Smarter Institute on their projects and working with the community. So we're making this with our sports, with our health initiatives, a university for the people where those barriers of elitism are taken out and that everybody can access and progress through the university. As I mentioned, this week is National Reconciliation Week, but in July we have NAIDOC Week, National Aboriginal Islander Day Observation Committee, where we celebrate across the nation another week, and that's NAIDOC Week, but also NAIDOC Day celebrations. A very important time for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to be able to demonstrate what we've achieved and to celebrate our successes and to help during that whole process of reconciliation for people to understand more about us and to share with us our celebration, but also the challenges that face us. This year's NAIDOC celebration and the theme behind it is Serving Country, Centenary and Beyond, and it's a time to honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have fought in defence of our country. And that defence, and I'm sure that we'll hear about this in a minute, started not only from when Australia was colonised, it didn't start after we formed as a nation, but it started from the time of colonisation. It's an important time to reflect on the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander servicemen and women who have contributed to the defence of this country, both on the frontier wars and in Australia's military conflicts and engagements across the globe. So as part of the University of Canberra celebration of NAIDOC, we've asked Professor Lisa Jackson Pulver to deliver this year's Ngunnawal Lecture. But don't jump up yet, Lisa. Let me introduce you. Professor Jackson Pulver, who's an old mate of mine, was appointed a member of the Order of Australia, AM, the Australia Medal, in 2011 for services to medical education and for support of educational opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Professor Jackson Pulver is a Professor of Public Health and the inaugural Chair of the Indigenous Health at the University of New South Wales. She is also a Director of the Uni New South Wales Murray Indigenous Health Unit and co-founder of the Shalom Gamarada Scholarship Program at UNSW, where she's been responsible for enabling over 60 students to receive residential scholarships on campus through selling art that my wife is we're going to buy her, yeah. So I feel part of that program. Professor Jackson Pulver is a group captain in the RAF Specialist Reserve, where she serves as a public health epidemiologist. She is currently posted to the Director of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs and is a specialist advisor to the Chief of the Air Force. Professor Jackson Pulver's particular area of interest is Indigenous health, empowerment and capacity building, and her background has made her acutely aware of the lack of available data to identify underlying issues in the context of health of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across their lifespan, from birth to becoming elders to passing. I'd also like to say that that Lisa at one stage had said that, asked in a magazine what she'd like to do and achieve, and so she said she'd like to sit around the campfire and have dinner with me. And so we're building a campfire at the back of our place in our renovations, just so we can facilitate that one campfire dinner. So can I ask you to please join me in welcoming Professor Jackson Pulver. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend, for such a beautiful and warm introduction. Thank you so much, Craig. Auntie Agnes, you make me feel so welcomed on your country. I always do. I feel safe and secure here. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge you and all of those here. I'm a Koori woman, and my people don't come from too far away. I'm a Wiradjuri woman, and so my people come from just across the mountain, from Wagga Wagga, which is not so far. And a little south of there from the Yorta Yorta lands, across the border into South Australia to Ceduna and Port Augusta, and from the far north coast to the Dunghutti lands and even further afield to those people of Wales and the ancient lands of Scotland. My family connections include people with many, many family names, and this is an Aboriginal protocol. We sit there and we go through all the family names, and what happens is that someone says, oh, I'm related to you, or are you related to Auntie Steve, and all this sort of stuff. So anyhow, my family connections include people with family names of Jackson, of Campbell, Bollard, Llewellyn, Angel, Smith, Powell, plus many, many more. So when you talk about the Smith family, you're not really talking about my family, but you are talking about my family because that's them. Anyhow, I'm going to play up tonight, I think so. But I want to talk a little bit, as you talked about acknowledging, welcoming to country and how important that is. I want to talk about acknowledging country. And I acknowledge your country, and it's an important thing for us to do. No matter who we are, for all of us that are here today, this simple process allows us to be abundantly conscious of where we're standing, where we're sitting and what we're doing here. This is Aboriginal land, and we have a great responsibility to be careful and to be mindful of that. To acknowledge country is done by those who are visitors or they're from another place. It recognises the role and the significance of the Aboriginal custodians here, of the Aboriginal people. As peoples of who we are, no matter who we are, we must follow the protocols that have stood strong over thousands and thousands of years. These protocols of ancient laws and customs that have stood the test of time for tens of thousands of years. This is a custom of the oldest continuous culture in the world. Protocols like this allow us to know who we are, where we are, what we can do, where we can do things and when while we're away from our home. For me to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country allows me to become a good guest. It allows me to contribute appropriately and who will remain well on your country. There is no difference when you're welcomed into an unfamiliar surrounding, like a church or a mess or someone's home. Your hosts will show you where you can remove your shoes, where you can place your belongings, where you can rest, where you can pray, where you can wash, eat, dance, meet and greet. When I think about country when I'm not on my land, I remember a conversation I had many years ago with one of my cousins about how our country never forgets us, no matter how long we're away or how far away we are from our country, and that we must never, ever, ever forget country. We must care for country, we must respect country, and we must speak to country. Country is real, it's alive and it's vibrant. It adapts over time and space and has been doing so since the beginning of time. This place is as different 60,000 years ago as it is today. Country holds dear our values, our loves, our stories, our ancestries, our dreamings, our life. It comes from the land and we will return to the land. When we acknowledge country, we do so recognising this ritual is not negotiable. It must be done when we're visitors to place, no matter who we are, and we must pay attention to those on whose land we stand. Country knows when we do this, and this makes everybody happy. I reintroduce myself to this country today, and on behalf of us all, including our treasured elders in attendance today, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters, and all of our brothers and sisters who are here tonight to pay our deep respects to the traditional owners, past and present, and to those who come. I honour all of those who will take on this role tomorrow. This evening I want to speak to you about belonging, of journeys and of change, and of leadership and what this means in times of enormous change. One of the most profound things that happened, I believe, in this country occurred way back in 2008. It seems like a lifetime ago. But it was an apology that was delivered by the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, and Dr. Brendan Nelson, following a series of processes that took centuries to get to. And for many people in my family, it wasn't so much the apology that made all the difference, but it was the tacit recognition of what had happened here for hundreds of years that has not been recognised. It was the tacit recognition of my grandmother, who for the first time after the 67 referendum felt safe enough to pull on her gloves and pop on her hat and go on a train into the city by herself. These were significant days, and I don't think a lot of people recognise just how jolly hard that was for people to do, and just how many of us remember today. 67 wasn't that long ago, and I would dare say a couple of us in this room were alive then. But I have, in all my spaces, and I've had the privilege of giving a few of these off to people, a copy of the actual apology document, and it's a beautiful document, and it's a lovely story of the calligraphy and of the artist who put that together, and of the hard work that went into it. It was work of the heart where that apology came from. And there's very few people that I know, when I ask them, where were you on Apology Day, they'll know exactly where they were. People from overseas, when I ask them, have you heard about the National Apology? They'd go, oh yeah, because everyone got it down on the wires, everyone got it on Foxtel or whatever, but they knew what it was and they knew how important it was. And it's interesting, Tom was saying a little while ago that it was a long time coming, and on the bridge walk in the Sydney Harbour Bridge, do you remember that day? You know, it was back in 2000, and I think someone unkindly said, well, it was a sunny day and people wanted to walk across the bridge. Well, I wasn't in Sydney on that sunny day. I was in a place called Wilcannia, which is in southwestern New South Wales, and this is the bridge walk in Wilcannia, and all the elders are at the front, and immediately behind them are all the elders from the non-Aboriginal community as well as others from the Aboriginal community. Everyone in that community went out that day, and we had the biggest sausage sizzle in the world, I think. I've never seen so many sausages in my life, but it was a significant event because it was all about people getting together and holding hands for a common good. And I'm very pleased to say that there's a young lady in that photo, and you can't quite see her from the resolution, that since that photo finished high school with a HSC and was the first person in that town to finish high school, and she's gone on to become a health worker, which is absolutely fantastic. So it's been a long walk, these bridge walks. And, you know, the struggle that people have had, you know, decent people, good people, have had to actually get to that point of having an apology, to get to that point of having Ngunnawal lectures, to get to that point where Aboriginal people, when they have children, can ordinarily expect that those children will have the same expectations of going to university, of being able to have kids that won't die early on or be not availed of the sort of treatment that others get. It's been a very, very, very long story. My uncle he died a few years ago, and he was a traditional custodian of the lands that are up around a place called Brewarrina. And a lot of my Wiradjuri relations were taken away from their country, and they were settled up on the mission up there. And my auntie married this man many, many years ago. And his people had been on this country since the beginning of time, which is probably a little bit longer than 60,000 years ago, but it's a long time. They've been there, they know the place. And as a young boy, he was taken onto this land and he was taught how to be a man. He was taught how to hunt. He was taught how to do things that men learn to do. And he was a very decent man, and he had many, many kids. And the females in his family also went to land like this and got taught by the women and how to be women and how to be good and how to be family and how to be community and how to belong. Because this is not something that just, suddenly comes in. It's something that you learn, that you get taught, that you can't belong unless you know about country. You can't belong unless you know something of language and of culture and where you're from. And it's a really difficult journey for those people who don't. But why I've got this photo up is that country is so important to us that when this country was under threat and there was some very unkind PR out there about if Aboriginal people could prove connection to country, you would lose your rights over that country. This country got fenced off. And I wish I had a photo, I couldn't find it today, but there's a photo I've got of this very area fenced off with a large sign that says trespassers will be shot on sight. Right, so now we're talking about the mid-90s. My uncle was pretty heartbroken. He went up to the pastoralist who had this land, and he said, "Come on, what's all this about? I want to bring the young fellas up here so they can learn to do the stuff that we've got to teach the young fellas, and we'll clear the land from some of those feral critters that you've got." And the landowner said, "No, you can't do this anymore." And my uncle was pretty heartbroken about that, and he said, "Well, that's silly. That's just stupid. I'm going to go on the land." He said, "No, don't. Seriously, I mean it. Don't come onto country, because what'll happen is that I'll have to protect my property." And he was quite heartbroken about that because he wasn't inclined to take anyone's land off them or remove their ability to be able to make a living. He just wanted to do something that his people have been doing for a long time. The sadness of it is that he died a few years later, and my aunt always said he died of a broken heart. He died of a broken heart. And I totally believe that, because he was a pretty fit fella up until then, but he got really sad and he got miserable and he became a broken man because he wasn't allowed to go back onto country. And the kids don't know a lot of the stories now, and they rely now on the younger men interpreting paintings and interpreting pictures. And fortunately, things have eased up a little bit here and they're allowed to go back onto country, but those elders have gone. Those ones that were direct owners of that knowledge that could pass it on from family to family have gone. It's interesting. But when I talk about Aboriginal stuff in the broader society in which I have the privilege of working, a lot of people say things like, what's so important about it? Come on, you fellas are a part of society. Look at you, look at all your friends. Aboriginal people are everywhere now, and that's true. But it's interesting when you turn on the telly and you watch the, what's that cup called that happens with that mob across the ditch? It's that footy, the Bledisloe Cup, yeah. What's the first thing that happens on that? The haka. Now what is that? What is it? Tell me. This is the interactive video, I know you know that one. But it's a really important cultural protocol that occurs, right? It's not meant to terrify people or anything like that. It's an important cultural protocol that the Maori people have been doing for a very, very long time. And sometimes when I talk, they say, well, what's the Aboriginal version of the haka? And I say, well, we've got 300 different mobs here, I'm sure we can work something out. But when we start talking about smoking ceremonies and acknowledgement of country, most people get it because they see how that's important, and most people want to feel that sense of belonging and being here and ownership and responsibility that belonging brings, in the same way that a lot of non-Maori New Zealanders can speak Maori. And that is just what they do, because that's the right thing to do, because they belong in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. Auntie Ali is someone who's quite important in my life, and Auntie Ali was the very first elder in residence at a faculty of medicine in the country. And that was, I'm very proud to say, my university at UNSW, and that was some years ago, and she's about to enter into her second term of eldership. And she is the first person that speaks at the beginning of day one, year one, of a 6-year program called medicine. Right, so it's not the dean they see, it's not anyone else, it's this little old lady comes tottering out and she sings them a song. And then she tells them about country. And she's a Biripi woman, so she's sharing her story. and talking about elders and how important they are, and she pops in on them. And so they might be in an anatomy lab and she'll just pop in on them and say, "What are you cutting up there, dear?" So it becomes a bit interesting when I have to rescue her. But it's really important. It's been recognised around the country. I don't think there's a university around now that doesn't have an elders program. I really don't. And it's a critically important thing that we're doing. And I think a lot of this is around the sense of healing that we're starting to go through as a nation. It's where we come together, and this is such an important week, reconciliation, where we come together not to reconcile differences, but to work out how it is we all here belong. I've got DNA in me that's from place far, far away. I wouldn't dream of being anyone different from that. And I've got non-Aboriginal relations in my family. I wouldn't dream of them not being here. They belong here. And it's really important that we learn how to belong here together. And I think healing is a critically important thing for us all to get a grapple with. It's not a softy thing. It's something that's very, very real and makes a difference in our organisations. It's interesting too because the Royal Australian Air Force has now got an elder in residence, and he's a gentleman called Uncle Harry Alley. And Uncle Harry has been the elder now for a couple of years, and he comes along to our important meetings and our important celebrations and our important events and participates in them. Recently, I had the privilege of attending a service in Adelaide last year. There was a memorial that was unveiled. Now, in Australia, there are war memorials in just about every town, right? You've seen them all. But there has never been a memorial that has recognised the role of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here. Did you know that the Torres Strait, out of all of the communities in Australia, the Torres Strait during World War II gave over 80% of their fit young men to go and serve? That's the highest proportion of any community group in this country, it's Torres Strait. And you know what? A lot of them didn't come back. They didn't come home. So in Adelaide is a memorial, and that opened in November last year, and just on Friday as a reconciliation event, they launched a DVD about the memorial. I'm in it, so along with our elders and along with other service personnel. But it's a story of how the memorial came to be, and this has now gone into the South Australian education curriculum. Right, so this is now part of the high school curriculum, this particular DVD, and you can download it. And so a local Aboriginal songwriter, Vonda Last, also decided as part of her contribution, she wrote a song. And that's also available on download. And I'm going to be giving this to Craig to keep in the Ngunnawal Centre so you fellas can use it and enjoy it. It's quite an important thing. But there's things like that happening everywhere now. We've got a memorial that'll be starting off in Sydney soon, and it's going to be built in Hyde Park, and it's going to be near the large memorial that is there standing already, which is good. But our healing continues to go on, and Australia becomes more of a living, breathing, reconciled nation because of the acts and actions of us all. Something as simple as sitting here and listening to me this evening is, I think, a significant thing for us all to do. There's not a government body that doesn't have a reconciliation action plan of some sort. There is not a large organisation that doesn't recognise the importance of having Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in it. Even an organisation as big as Defence recognises the need for smoking ceremonies and what that means. And this is not tokenism. This is at the most senior college that the Defence organisation has got. It's called the Centre for Defence Strategic Studies. And every single student goes through the smoke at a smoking ceremony. Auntie Agnes was the one that did Welcome to Country, and that is what starts off the beginning of every single year. So there's been a lot of changes happening, and these people will be the leaders of defence in years to come, because that's a college that's built for those people. And the first thing they hear about is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways. And I have to say, it makes the New Zealanders very, very happy. And they tend to respond now, so that's really cool. But we're still stuck in some of the ordinary thinking. You know, I still get a lot of people asking me questions that I would consider to be deficit thinking about scarcity, and that somehow still our people sit at the margins of society. And this is a piece of work that we did last year, and it was all around looking at what are the programs that work, and we did a word map of some of the terminology that is built into research papers, some of the terminology that is built into tenders that go out and into programs for funding, and a lot of the language is around the disempowering language of illness, of disease, of early deaths, and even those things that are a reality, it's very, very hard at the end of the day to get some funding up for something that talks about healing and growth and empowerment, gaining hope, understanding country and learning culture. All of that stuff in the blue zone is the stuff that talks about healing and well-being, and if any of you look at that very, very closely, I suspect that you'll be able to recognise that when people are in disconnected from country or disconnected from community, they will not be as well as if they are connected with community and connected with country. You're still going to get sick, right? That's the reality of life. But you're going to heal better and be better supported if you've got family and mob around you that's looking after you. In other words, if there's a healing space, you start to develop an authentic identity, and that allows you to feel stronger and to grow in what you're doing. So I'd like to acknowledge Melissa Haswell for leading that important work last year. But at the end of the day, a lot of the work that I like doing is around kids and how it is we grow the next generation of kids. You know, Aboriginal population, people don't get this. 5% of all kids in Australia are Aboriginal. 5%. The proportion, the mainstream proportion of us, about 3%. Right, so 5%. The majority of our population, 50%, is less than 21.8. Where's the demographer? Yep, okay, he's nodding. Good, got it right. Yeah, so 50% of our people are younger than 21.8. 50% of non-Aboriginal people are younger than 38. Right, so that shows you the size and the difference of our populations. We've got a huge proportion of our young people are under the age of 14, and that's where these kids are. And it makes me feel really solid and strong when I look at kids like this, because they're obviously learning something of culture, right? Because they're dressed up ready to dance. They're dressed up ready to go. And when I think about that, I think about what health is. And when we look at health, we don't just mean the physical well-being, but we also talk about the individual in the context of their family and their community, of social, emotional, cultural well-being, and it's a whole of life view which is inclusive. So being well and strong includes being able to look on your kids and see them getting dressed up to dance. Being well and strong is all about knowing that your grandkids are going to go to school, and if they want to be a nurse or a doctor, then they're jolly well going to be able to. And I'm very proud to report that we've even got a young lady at university at the moment who dreams of becoming a Royal Australian Air Force pilot. And that's an incredible thing to be wanting to achieve, and I have absolutely no doubt that that young lass will get there. So when we start looking at holism, when we start looking at what we can become, I start thinking of this particular picture. This was done as a cake, like as in a cake that you cut up and eat, believe it or not. And I don't know how they do that stuff on the top, but this was done for some old people. And it was all about how old people view Australia. You know, they don't see it as bits, they don't see it as territory, they don't see it as parts, the same way they don't see health as parts. They see how health is very much a whole. One of the world's leading futurists, a guy called Suhail Inatullah, recently took an organisation I'm involved with called the Lecture Institute onto a guided exercise into the future. Now, being health professionals, you know, like we know the stats backwards and inside out. And I'm a pretty good optimist. You know, I always see what we can do and certainly look at the passion of the possible. But we'd gone through quite a lot of work, and he wanted us to have a look at the future in 20 or 30 years. And I just closed my eyes and took a deep breath, and I was going to draw a picture of how that felt. It was one of those guided visualisations, right? And I was thinking, gee, it's going to be hard to try and get this down just in the few minutes. We've got population growth that's unprecedented. We've got climatic change that is real, and the effects are felt today. We have natural resources declining to the lowest of lows. We've got non-communicable diseases that we can probably name that haven't been as prevalent as they are today. Infectious diseases that are higher than higher. I was reading an article over the weekend about malaria and where that's going, and dengue fever. In other words, we're facing a world with challenges that we have never before faced. Yet peoples of this place have been here for 60,000 years, right? And there have been challenges then. I mean, we had ice ages. You know, we did remarkable stuff. And we've survived natural catastrophes over that time, and in the past 220 years, we've survived and grown despite the challenges that we've had to endure. Anyhow, I went through this exercise led by Sahel, and I saw that despite the challenges, we, as in all of us who belong here, resilience is an important thing. And it kept leaping out. Resilience, resilience, resilience. And I saw that, and I was clearly seeing the many challenges, but I was also seeing at the same time the solutions to those challenges. And I see those solutions as being things like young kids in primary school today singing our national anthem in English and then singing our national anthem in language. And that happens today, even in schools in the ACT. There are few today in our country that don't recognise the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag, and more people are starting to use the many lenses that we've been seeing our land for such a long time. We've got things like controlled burning that we've been using for millennia, and people are starting to learn about that. Things around our bush tucker and natural resources, how to get water, medicine, healing. When we think about holistic health and the definition of that, what that is, people are starting to recognise that as something useful for themselves. I think that once we all belong and we start to get used to that idea that we belong here, therefore we have a responsibility for this land, our communities will stop othering others and start focusing on what's possible and what will work, and collectively, congruently hold hands together on this path of reconciliation. I really see that as together and forever. Another 60,000 years. We have to do things differently than what we're doing now if we are going to be here for as long as my ancestors have been here. So I really do think that when we think about the logo of the organisation I'm standing here for today, the Royal Australian Air Force, we have a saying that's through struggle to the stars. And I think struggle can be a good thing, because we can learn to do things better as a result of that. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm very happy to take as many questions as you have for me. Thank you.